What's happening, friends, and welcome to another live edition of Syracuse Sports. You got Brent X, you got Javon Edmonds here, and we've got a couple of juicy Syracuse football discussions to have with you. One is Syracuse head coach Fran Brown did an interview this afternoon on ESPN Radio Syracuse, where amongst other topics, certainly the Trebor Pena news that he had entered the transfer portal was discussed. Fran gave his reaction to that, said a couple other interesting things about where Syracuse could be going in the transfer portal in terms of positions, and a couple other thoughts on Rickie Collins as the starting quarterback in spring practice. We will discuss that. Javon and I are also going to go a little rapid fire to wrap up spring ball. We're going to go through each position and just kind of come up with the things that come to mind about where that position is at with spring ball over and the portal open here. So we will do that. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders had plenty to say about everything we're going to discuss today, and it's right there on your screen if you're watching. But I would highly encourage you. I've been so encouraged, Javon, to see some new people signing up for the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. Like, oh, I've been watching the pod. I've heard about it. I finally signed up, and they love what they're getting. And we would love for you to be like Peter, one of our new subscribers, who's like, man, I should have been doing this a long time ago. It's right there on your screen to sign up to be a Syracuse Sports Insider, which gives you direct text message access to me. If we have breaking news, you get it first. Analysis, opinions, your questions highlighted exclusively on this pod. We do not take questions and comments from social media, from Telegraph, from telephone, from anywhere else. It's just our insiders that get their voice heard on this show. So we would love for you to sign up today. It's right there on your screen on how to do that. So Javon, Fran Brown, always entertaining, always straightforward in these interviews, came on today and had, amongst other things, a response to the Trebor Pena news, the big story that Chris Carlson and I did a podcast about yesterday, if you guys want to check that out. Let me just ask you what your takeaways from that conversation were. And Javon has a good recap of it up on syracuse.com that you can read. But what were the things that stood out to you and Fran's response to the Trebor Pena news and all that's happening from that?
So before I say any of this, just let's all remember there's always three sides to a story. The A side, the B side, and then the truth. So we have the A side. I would love to get the B side.
Mm-hmm. Trevor's certainly welcome to tell us this side of the story.
So I will say, like, we all have lives outside of the job, right? So yeah. I've spoken to a few friends today. Seems like a lot of people on the East Coast have like very similar thinking, because every text or call I've gotten today was like, hey man, you covering an interesting dude up there in Syracuse. I like the way he thinks. Yeah, you know what? They got all these receivers coming up after this Pena dude, and he's supposedly asking for all that money. Yeah, let him go. I like this guy. We need more coaches like that. So I bring that up because the one thing that stuck with me was he kept mentioning how he just could not pay a receiver $2 million unless it was Jeremiah Smith. Those were Fran Brown's words. So I don't know if that was Trebor Pena's asking price or if he came close to it. But there was clearly an asking price that Fran Brown was just like, nah, man, I got Bobby Johnson, Daryl Gill, Justice Ross Simmons, and Emmanuel Ross, and Jalen Hornsby, and Umari Hatcher here, and Jeff Nixon has sent guys to the NFL. Go ahead and go. So you add that combined with the claim that he was asking about Rickie Collins, like, hey, coach, you sure about this guy? What makes you so confident in him? You sure he's ready to go this year and not next year? And Fran had an issue with that. Like, hey, man, I'm the head coach. That's my job. I'm very big on this. Like, I'm not Laura Ingram, shut up and dribble whatsoever. But I do believe in sports. We have an issue of players not wanting to be players. Like, there's a reason you have a team owner, a front office, a coaching staff, and then players. I am very big on maintaining that order. And that order is becoming a thing in college sports now. And it seems like college football and its programs are not going to fall into the same trap that the NBA did of that player empowerment crap. They are setting a firm tone and standard of the players are going to remain the players. Fran Brown just did that with Trebor Pena today. He set a tone for his locker room and for anyone who wants to come into that locker room in the future. I respect that. We've heard, Brent, that there's coaches around the country that, they're in communication with each other of, hey, listen, we're not going to give Nico Iamaleava what he's asking for. We cannot let that set the standard of what college football is about to become. So these coaches are sticking to their guns. It's a new era in college football, but they're not ceding their control anytime soon is what it looks like.
Let me tell you why I disagree with that.
Okay.
Fran Brown at an NIL event in December gets to Trebor Pena, says, here's Trebor Pena, who is coming back, and Trebor Pena is going to be a captain on this team. Trebor Pena as a captain has a little more voice than, say, Boobie Johnson or a freshman. If a freshman is saying that to Fran Brown, like, are you sure about Rick? And again, you said it best. We're only getting the A side of this conversation right now.
Yeah.
Right. And if Fran took it the wrong way, how Trebor Pena was, I think, asking fair questions. Are we sure about Rickie Collins? Are we sure about this? Trevor knows that he played with an NFL level quarterback last year. And Trevor, I think, is fair to ask. And again, we didn't know the context of the conversation. I think it's fair for the leader of the offense, the top receiver, and a captain to say, are we sure about this? Right? Now, if he's saying it in a way that he's questioning the decision of the coach to start the quarterback, yeah, that's one thing. But I think it's fair for Trevor to wonder, is this good for me? And for Fran to say that Trevor was about Trevor, well, yeah, Trevor is about Trevor. I think Trevor, I don't want this to become like let's just dump on Trebor Pena here because he made the best decision for him, right? So we're only getting Fran's side of that. But I think Trevor's got a little more voice in there. I mean, you named him a captain. And from what I understood, yeah, coaches certainly say things and what they have to say goes, and Fran is setting a tone and a culture. But captains have a say. Like we saw that meeting, Javon, after practice on Monday. That was a leadership council. Those were captains telling the coach, this is what we think. Trevor was on that panel, right? So I think those are fair questions for Trevor to wonder, and if he fits best in that offense and with that team. Now, again, I don't know how he questioned it, and if he was like criticizing the decision, that's one thing. But to just wonder what my role in this is, and are we sure about this? I think that's fair for a captain to say. Now, if he just spoke up and wasn't asked that question, I guess, context is everything here. So I don't agree with that because I feel like Trevor was given a little more leeway to speak up on an issue like that. Now, I'm gonna throw a question back. I'm sorry, go ahead, and then I got another question for you. Yeah,
there are levels to it, though, right? And receivers have this reputation automatically just off of the position they play, and Terrell Owens and Chad Johnson and Antonio Brown haven't made life easier for that position in this standpoint. But okay, you're a captain, sure, but you're still a player, right? In this coaching staff, like Fran said it best on the air today. The dude sat behind Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. You're not a scrub to be in the LSU quarterback room. And there is no shame in sitting behind those guys. So, just trust us on this one. So if it was just that, it'd be fine. But then there's you're asking for money to go with that. On top of, no player got load managed more than Trebor Pena in the spring for Syracuse.
Yeah.
Like he had it made he had it made this spring, So I'm listening to that interview, and it seemed like Fran was trying to hint that he may have become a head case. I don't know. Listen, I'm not going to pretend to have the details. I'm not going to take a side on this one because I never believe 100% of what one person says.
Well,
especially when it's a multi-person story.
Yes.
But it's just
there's
if
a
everything
certain,
Fran said is true, I understand where he was coming from. Like, hey, listen, man, I can't pay you all this money for one season when I've got these guys behind you that can play.
Yes, which is my next
I've got
question.
an offensive coordinator and Jeff Nixon that I believe in.
That's my next question, and we'll get to that. But you brought up a good point in that. Look, there's a certain amount of spin that comes with this because Fran was effusive in his praise of Trevor after the spring game. You were in that scrum, right?
Yeah.
Saying the phenomenal spring that Trebor Pena had, right? Had Trebor Pena and Syracuse agreed on the price, then Fran Brown would be effusive in his praise of Trebor Pena in this interview today, right? Oh, what a great guy. He wanted to stay here. And it's like you could spin a lot of this stuff. So I think we just have to keep that in mind, that Fran has the bully pulpit. We're only hearing one side of this. And I'll be curious to see what Trevor says about that in the future. And as you said, Javon, and somewhere in the middle of all this is the truth of the matter, right? But here's my next question. By and large, should Syracuse have met Trebor Pena's price, which, again, we don't know what that price is. Now, I've heard, Javon, it is in the $1 million range, that he is at least at that level, right? Let's start the conversation at $1 million. I have heard from a couple sources that I don't know who it is. We've heard Miami and Texas Tech connected. The portal opened today. Trevor is in it. We'll see where it ends up here. But I've heard we're starting the conversation at $1 million. So let's just say it's there. Should Syracuse have met that price for Trebor Pena? Is he that important to the team?
I'd have to see their books. Here's my thought process on roster building. I don't think you pay someone just because some other team is willing to, or that's what the market dictates. Like, the market has Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott making $40 million a year. Neither one of those dudes are worth that money. The market had Alan Crabb making 4 years, $75 million for the Portland Trail Blazers back in 2016. There is in no world that Alan Crabb is worth $75 million for the entirety of his career. Okay. 1 year, you've got a talented receivers room, and you're kind of like, listen, you're going towards the youth movement anyway. Let the old head walk. I've got no issue with the thought process of letting him walk on this one. Now, if this were one of those years, you know how in college sports you got those years where pretty much every big name player is a senior, and this is the year that it has to happen for that group. It's like conference championship or bust type of thing. If it were one of those years, then you pay Trebor Pena, but it's not. If for all intents and purposes, this is a retooling, borderline rebuilding season for Syracuse. You don't spend that money.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at it just objectively, knowing what I think the NIL budget is, who's worth what, and look, you're worth what somebody's willing to pay you. If Trebor Pena can get $1 million, if that's the number, whatever it is, from Miami, Texas Tech, or whoever wants to pay him that, then you go do it. Nico, I always struggle with the last name, Javon. I'm alive. I think I said that wrong, but I struggle with that. But let's just go with Nico for the sake of it. Is finding out the hard way what his value is, right? He thought it was X. It's turned out to be Y. And he's going to end up somewhere in the portal, but I don't think he's going to end up somewhere in the portal at that $4 million price that has been reported out there that he is seeking, right?
Can I comment on that real quick?
Yes, you can.
If any college athlete happens to hear this podcast, please understand this. College is still different from the pros for this reason. So Nico wants like $4 million because apparently that's like somewhere in the ballpark of what Duke had to pay for Darian Mensah or something like that, right?
Carson back at Miami too, right?
Carson back at Miami too. So let's just say, I'm going to stick to Mensah for the purposes of my argument. Let's say Duke had to pay $4 million for Darian Mensah, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't the NBA or the NFL where every franchise is built equal because of the salary cap. This is college sports. Duke has to overpay for Darian Mensah. Mm-hmm. Tennessee can find a Nico Ayama-Liava whenever and wherever. There's context to the money of college sports. So please, before you go price tag hunting, Keep that in mind. The level of the program in its history has a lot to do with how much they have to spend or overpay for a player. That's where Nico went wrong. Trevor, on the other hand, receivers are premium. There's national championship contenders that will go ahead and their donors will come up with the money to go get him. So he's fine in what he's doing. But for anyone else, please understand, there's no such thing as market price in college sports. There is context price.
So here's what Fran
Trevor
said
Pena
today.
did.
Right. Here's what Fran said today in the interview, Javon. Quote, we paid him enough. Quote, he was going to get paid more, but there were some numbers that were asked of me that I didn't feel I would be able to do everything that was needed. I just said, yo, you've got to go. Okay, that's fine. That's where I agree with Fran. Fran has to assess this, know what the budget is, know that they're going into the portal. He said in that interview they're going to be seeking a quarterback. They're going to be seeking a linebacker. And naturally, players that are going to have to get more NIL money. I mean, Demetrius Samuel Jr., I know, is set to earn a little bit more, get a little bump, and just the natural flow of business that happens in college sports. If
things go the way you want them to go, you've got to pay to retain Rickie Collins.
Yes, you do. Which is another thing Fran said today, by the way. So Trebor Pena, if we're starting the conversation at around $1 million, if that's the number, and I've heard that's where we're kind of starting here, then no, you can't pay him that. And not that Syracuse has to be Moneyball here, but you can replace that in the aggregate, to steal a line from that movie. There is enough production behind Trevor. Now, I said on yesterday's pod, and I still mean this because I think it's true, they don't have another Trebor Pena on this roster. He is a unique player, a unique slot receiver, a unique talent in what he does. They don't just have somebody, okay, we'll pop him in that spot. They do have to recreate his production in a different way, right? I'm not saying it's a backbreaker. I'm not saying, oh my God, without Trebor Pena, that offense is nothing. But Pena was a safety valve for Kyle McCord. All else fails, Trevor would be open and Trevor would get yards after the catch. And you just have that safety valve. They just have to put someone else in either in that slot position or in a different position to replace that. So he does have that kind of unique talent. Is it a case of we have to match that price no matter what and retain it? I agree with Fran. You can't be paying receivers that much money unless you have a Travis Hunter like talent, a Jeremiah Smith like talent. It's you have enough depth to replace him. So that's where I agree with Fran. If we're just talking business here, here's the numbers I was given. God bless Trevor. He's a captain. He's been around for a while. He's our leading receiver. But if we're just talking business here, I feel like I can replace that. That's where I agree with Fran.
And here's the thing. You mentioned slot receiver. That's really what hurts Trevor here, because we can take a trip down memory lane, go back about, 25? Let's go back about 15 years. The slot receivers started to blow up because Wes Welker and Julian Edelman were playing with who?
Yep.
Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. They were playing with pocket passers. Syracuse isn't going to be some stand-up pocket passing team this year. Like, Rickie Collins is going to use his legs a bit.
Mm-hmm.
His safety valve isn't going to be a slot receiver. His safety valve is going to be whoever executes the scramble drill the best, you know? So from that standpoint, Trevor becomes a little bit less valuable. Like, no, the guys out wide mean more this season than the guys inside. That's just how it works. So, you know, when you've got a lot of guys that they like, when you got Justice Ross Simmons, you got Emmanuel Ross, you brought in Tyshawn Russell because you think he can play. Mario Hatcher is still on the team. Bobby Johnson is good. They like Hornsby. You can find one of them to put in the slot. They're all hungry for minutes. I didn't even mention Darryl Gill Jr. They're all hungry for snaps, and you need somewhere to put them. Losing Trevor Pena kind of helps you clear up that log jam, to be honest with you. So
on that note,
you're not too mad at that.
while you're on that note, Javon, something that Fran said as well fits with that discussion. He said, quote, "Why would I try to convince somebody to be somewhere when I know the offense works?" Quote, "He was worrying about things that players don't worry about. Players work, and I worry about us. Trevor was worrying about his future. I want to make sure I go to the league. I've got to make sure I have another year like I had last year." Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? Yes, that's what college is all about. What's my future? I feel like I'm an NFL level talent, and can I continue to develop as an NFL level talent at Syracuse? I think that's a fair question for Trevor to ask. And I think he got an honest answer to it, right? And Fran is going to give direct analysis to all of his players that reach that level. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking that. Now, again, maybe it was the way it was presented. Maybe you talk about that after the season. That's all relative to the conversation. But for Trevor to be asking these questions, I think is completely fair. And then he gets an offer that comes in that, in his mind, in the minds of some, I'm not saying anybody has to agree with this, but validates what he's thinking. I've got, let's just say theoretically, Miami willing to pay me this much, who puts the value in what I am, and I'm going to go there and replace a similar player that's about to get drafted, by the way. I think he's got every right to think that and say that. And look, players have to work. I get a certain amount of discipline that has to be out there, but we're in the player empowerment era. We're in a different era where these business transactions are taking place, and they should have a voice in that and should wonder about that. And that's why the portal exists. If we're not all on the same page here, I have an opportunity to go elsewhere. So I don't begrudge him that. It's just a little tougher to take for some because he was a captain, and it just felt like, he didn't have business in mind. But in a sense, I say good for him for sensing this wasn't going to work the way that I thought it would. Here's the portal, and we'll all move on.
So I'm glad you mentioned he absolutely had NFL interest this offseason. So, like, this year is for him move up the draft boards.
Yeah.
And that probably will be done better at a different program for him. So, like, there's no he did what any person on earth is supposed to do, which is he did right by himself. So there's no need to crucify him for that. But if this were actually about money and not, I got to go somewhere where I'm going to be a better fit, then just say that. That's where I'm at with these things across the sports landscape. Tell us what it's really about. Don't tell us about one thing when it's about the other. Stick to one. Like, choose one and stick to one. That's all.
So that's the Trebor Pena story, which will continue to be debated here, especially when we see where he ends up, Javon. And doesn't feel like we got to wait long before we find out where he's going. And maybe we'll get that number of how much he ends up getting paid in the NIL space, which, again, seems to be north of $1 million at this point. So another thing that Fran said today is that Syracuse will be looking for a quarterback and a linebacker in the portal. Zach Gibson did visit recently. He was at Monday's practice. He's the Georgia State quarterback. He also played at Georgia Tech, started a few games there, also spent some time at Akron. So he did not commit. I know he had some comments to our friend Mike McAllister about what his visit was like. And in the course of that, they said basically they've got to figure out what they're doing at the position, and they'll kind of let Zach know if he's in their plan. So it's not like visit, commit immediately. They're keeping their eye out there on the quarterback position. And Fran mentioned specifically MJ Jr. in the portal. We've got to bring in somebody to help compete in that room. AJ Miller also went in the portal. I mean, AJ Miller was not in the mix as a young walk-on freshman, right? So you still have Jakari as of now as the backup, and Luke Carney, who played in the spring game, and Rich Beelan, who played in the spring game. But Fran making it clear they're going to add a quarterback. So that'll be interesting to watch. Linebacker is also a position that he's looking to add in the portal. So keep an eye on that until April 25th when the portal closes here. And Javon, it's interesting because we've talked through some of these spring practice pods that we've been doing, and we always kind of circle back to linebacker. And it's like, I don't know, there's something missing there. Maybe they needed another player or two. So to hear Fran say that today made perfect sense to me. And I guess I'm not that surprised at quarterback either. I mean, you need competition in that room, and you lost your most veteran presence. Everybody else in that room lacks experience. So to bring in a veteran quarterback to help push things along with Rickie being the clear starter, I don't think it's going to hurt, but that might hurt your chances to get a quality quarterback, for Rickie, Javon, because everybody that comes here is coming in with the understanding of you're starting to compete for the backup job. Just so we're clear here, we don't have an open starting quarterback position. That might make their job a little harder.
Yeah, but some people are aware of who they are. Like there's somebody who's gonna be like, I'm gonna be here and wish Rickie has the greatest season ever, so someone can buy him out in the portal, and then I can compete with Jakari Williams to be starting
There
next
you
year.
go.
Like somebody's going to want to come to Syracuse with that type of wishful thinking. But the linebackers run. Like I think we all knew that was coming. I just haven't been impressed by the linebackers. I just don't see the physicality from them that I need to see. And Fran Brown has said that many a time throughout the spring himself. So I'm not making this one up. That group just has been, to me, at least, underwhelming. And in college sports, like, listen, I can't say I know the dude personally whatsoever. But for me, when I see an entire position group is underwhelming, I look at the position coach. Because either you're not targeting the right guys, or once you get them on campus, you're not developing them the right way. Granted, Marlon Wax was good here. Justin Barron, good here. He's probably going to have an NFL career just off of his availability to play the pass, right? But I'm just looking at that room, and I don't see it. No one popped off the – no one popped to me. Like when we had to do our 2 deep last week, I leaned on you and Chris for the linebackers because no one created separation in my eyes. And then the spring game came, and I felt perfectly fine with my thoughts of that is an underwhelming position group.
And Fran agrees with the thought that they've got to get out there and get a linebacker in the portal. So that is something to watch there. Rickie, today, what was the other? Fran updated Rickie's status. So he missed the spring game, was not in practice on Monday. He's not going to practice today, which, by the way, Syracuse's final practice, Fran Brown noted in that interview, is in Rochester today. It is not an open practice. I'm not even sure where they're practicing, but Fran was joking during the interview, Javon, like we're going to get on the yellow buses and get out there, and it's going to be like the offense and defense have to compete with each other on one last practice where the pads are going to be popping here. So it's interesting that they're going off site for that final practice and going to Rochester. So if you're out in the Rochester area, let us know if you see a football team out there somewhere out there. They can't be hard to miss, especially if they're outdoors, right? So
can't miss that bus that they ride. Yeah, no.
Can't miss, exactly. And again, it's not an open practice from what we understand. It's certainly not open to the media. So we'll see if any highlights come out of that. But what Fran said about Rickie is that he will be ready to practice in June. Okay. I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast here. I was actually joking on the phone with Javon the other day that I was doing some WebMDing, which is very dangerous to do, by the way. If you have symptoms, do not go on WebMD. You're basically going to die. Like, I have the sniffles. And then you start reading about why you have the sniffles. It's like, yeah, you're going to die. Just don't do that. But in my amateur WebMDing, Javon, that tracks from what I think Rickie's injury is. And I don't want to say it because I'm not 100% sure on this. I've heard what it could be, but coming back in June and being ready to go, that's about a 2-month window of recovery, and that tracks from what I think his injury is. And it's not a serious thing. It's certainly something he can recover from. And if anything, the timing's good that it happened at the end of camp, and he'll have time to recover from it and be ready to go in June. But Fran did say that today. So doesn't appear to be anything serious that's going to knock him out of camp or anything of concern there.
So I would say Fran has earned a decent bit of my trust. But we haven't known each other long enough for me to trust him on injury reports, to be honest with you. I don't trust a single coach when it comes to injury reports.
Yeah.
When I see Rickie Collins on the field is when I will believe he is okay.
Fair enough.
As far as I'm
Coaches,
concerned,
yep.
as far as I'm concerned, his throwing thumb's about to fall off the bone, and they're going to be panicking to try to pay Nico this summer. And for all I know, like I just, me and coaches, when it comes to injury reports, don't ask me to believe 2 syllables they say. So we'll see. I don't know anything. I'm making this clear because I don't want anyone calling my phone and hitting my DM. I know nothing. I'm just saying I don't trust any coach walking God's green earth about injury reports. And that's it.
And you shouldn't. You brought up Nico. Okay. There have been I want to be careful about this. Because you have to be careful about using the word reports that are not reports. But there's been some
rumors, speculation, and
there's been speculation from certain areas, right? And people have asked, like, do you think Syracuse is in on Nico? And my answer is no. I'm very skeptical of that. I know there is a certain commentator out there whose name I will not mention on this podcast, who I hold my nose in a lot of what he says, but I will say is connected to Tennessee. And he put Syracuse on a list of teams that would make sense for Nico. And it's just, that's not happening. I'd be stunned if, first of all, even not at his $4 million asking price, whatever his asking price is, the fact that they've settled on Rickie Collins as their quarterback, all things considered, that's just a headache you don't want. I'm very skeptical, right? I guess in this world, Javon, you got to leave that little crack in the window open of wacky things happening here. Maybe they had concerns before they got a full report on Rickie's injury, just like, hey, what's going on with Nico? We might need a quarterback. Then they got the report back on Rickie. They know what the time frame is. Okay, we're out, right? But I'm just going to go with a hard no on that one. And if I'm wrong on that, I'll eat my words about that. But I don't think I'm leaping off a tall bridge to say that.
I can say with supreme confidence, everything you hear about Nico's camp, specifically his dad, who I've seen described as LeVar Ball without the charm, I can say with supreme confidence, that is not something Fran Brown would deal with.
I agree.
He'd probably call Elijah Robinson to, as we say back in Baltimore, take care of his light work. Yes. If Nico's dad were to just barge into his office on some hot stuff. So I just don't see that mixing well with this staff whatsoever. So I call complete baloney on any speculation of Nico Iamaleava to Syracuse.
I'm Iamaleava. Weird things have happened, kids, but that's no. I'm going to go with a no on that one. So we've already mentioned a couple position groups. What I wanted to do to kind of wrap up spring a little bit was I'm going to mention a position group where Javon and I are just going to give you a kind of rapid fire things that pop to mind, what that position group is like here at the end of camp. Do they need to address it in the portal? Are they fine? Or just whatever pops to mind here. So we know who QB1 is. We mentioned they're looking for a quarterback. So that's what actually came to mind for me, Javon. Say the name quarterback, I say needs more experience, right? They need more experience in that room with MJ gone, and they're going to try and find that in the portal.
Make it an experienced guy, and this is hard to ask. This is a lot to ask for at this point in the portal. An experienced guy that actually has had some type of okayness to him somewhere. Don't bring me a 60-year guy that can't play and he's just there to be the elder statesman. I let him have some type of success somewhere, Mm-hmm.
Running back, I'm good with. I like you seeing Willis as a top back. We didn't see Will Nixon in camp because he's recovering from a Liz Frank injury, but I liked what I saw from him last year. And by the time he recovers, I think he's in the mix. We saw flashes of Jaden Hart, right? Speed guy, got some run with the ones here in camp. I think with what Nixon wants to do with that running game, who they have on the roster, they did lose Jordan Montanez to the portal today, who had a nice showing in the spring game, so you lose a little bit of depth there. But I think they're okay at running back. It's not to say if you spot one in the portal that you can get at a good price that could add some depth. Maybe you think about it, but I think they're okay there. What's the thought that comes to mind with running back?
Jaden Ott from Cal is available in the portal, I wouldn't be mad if they went out and got him. I haven't heard anything.
Well,
again, so
I heard Oklahoma. I think he's locked in at Oklahoma. So,
well, yeah, good luck down there.
But Javon,
yeah,
every single running back on the Cal roster went in the portal.
All of them. Yeah. So
yeah. So there's some out there. Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do out there in Berkeley this year. Looks like a big game might be decided by Stanford. But running backs, I'm hearing a lot of this. Now I need to see it. Yeah. Like Yassine Willis is a big back, so there's not much sneaking and creeping through the crevices of the O-line that's going to happen there. So he's already at a disadvantage unless he can run someone over. Will Nixon, we haven't seen in the spring, right? Jaden Hart, and listen, we hear Jeff loves him a lot. I need to see it. Like with the backs, I'm hearing a lot. I need to see.
That's fair. Wide receiver, we've talked a lot about with the Trebor thing. I guess the question is, and a lot of our insiders have asked me this. Now that Trevor's gone, do they have to find another receiver in the portal? And my answer is no. I don't think you have to. I think you're good. You're deep. You've got deep threats. You've got slot guys. You've got short range guys, long range guys. You start to mix in the tight ends in the passing game. Dan Villari was in a green jersey most of camp, but we saw him working with Rickie Collins every single day. How much does David Clement build in as a pass catching threat? They really like Elijah Washington Baker, and I like that he's 6'7", 230, but he's still a freshman and he's still developing. I think they're good at receiver. That's if we had an emoji, I'd put the green check next to it. I think we're okay there.
The receiver is their best position by far. No questions, comments, or concerns. Now, tight end, that's different. I don't think the group as a whole is going to replace Deronde Gadsden's production. I'll be honest with you. I think that is going to be a quiet group this season, but I could be wrong. I don't think I will be, but anything can happen.
That is not a case of where you can replace the production in the aggregate here. I just think of the scouts in the room in the Oakland A's boardroom are like, we can't replace Giambi at first in the aggregate.
That movie was such crap. Oh, man. Oh, they left out so much.
It did.
What really went on with the A's that year. Goodness.
We could do a whole pot on Moneyball. I love Moneyball. It is one of my favorite movies. I think it's one of the best baseball movies ever made. But you are not wrong that they left out some key details to tell a better story.
The way you feel about Moneyball is the way I feel about the Temptations miniseries. Great for television. So much inaccuracy and things that were left out. Like, I think those two movies are more inspired by a true story.
Yes.
Than being an actual biopic.
I mean, Hollywood would never do such a thing. How dare I suggest that? Offensive line. They mixed around a lot of things in the off. We saw what it ended up being first team in the spring game, but Dale Williams stressing. That's my offensive line for now, right? We think, according to Fran, David Woolabaugh is going to go into the portal. We have not seen that officially yet, but we think that's going to happen. I think as long as they don't lose too many more guys from that position, I'll say okay. I think they're okay, but they're still trying to settle in on a number of things. They don't know who their center is, which is a big problem. Mark Petrie is by default now the center. Woolabaugh was working at center. He's gone. I'm still wondering about Big Spoon at right tackle. I'm still wondering, have you really locked down your left tackle? I really like Joe Cruz at right guard. I think he's one of the more versatile guys, can move around a little bit. But I like but don't love it. I guess that's the way I'll frame it.
I think I am fine with the first string of the offensive line, especially the interior. I don't know if they have the depth that Fran Brown says they have. I love the coaching staff that they've got in the offensive line unit. Absolutely love Dale and his guys. They do exceptional work. I think the starting five is solid. I don't know if they've got a sixth man. That's my concern with the O-line. So in college football, I think you need 7. You're in great position if you've got 8. I don't know if they've got a 6th man. That's just
Enrique Cruz has been that guy, and he's been a starter. He's been on the second line. He's always been on the fringe there. He's a very popular guy. There's a whole Syracuse tailgate. Shout out to them. They love Enrique Cruz, and they have a relationship with him. He's right on the fringe there, right?
But
he's one of those guys.
Guys who live on the fringe don't do anything for me. Because that tells me you can't get over the hump. Like you just don't have it.
But you need him, right? And we're still trying to figure out how much Nyquil Bertrand, right? Where is he? They like him a lot. He's 6'6", 320. But if he was that good, he would have been, you'd see number 60 out there throughout camp with the ones, right? He's still trying to find his way. So they have a few guys that are right on the fringe that have to step up and prove that they can be consistent guys. That's where losing Wollabaugh hurts. He was a proven, veteran, versatile guy who's now healthy, by the way. He's battled some injuries at his time at Syracuse. As healthy as you can be as an offensive lineman, who always seem to be battling something, that's going to stay.
Always.
So if you can find a Wollabaugh type in the portal, snag him, because you can't have enough depth from that standpoint in that room.
How many Mondays after rivalry week have you been around a football facility for?
Not a ton, to be honest with you, because Syracuse doesn't really have a big rivalry. That's what stinks about it. They have Pittsburgh, who they have history with, and they have Boston College, who they have history with, but they don't have a Michigan, Ohio State's a lofty comparison.
but like
they don't have that. Yeah.
I'm not even talking about the game. I'm saying the Monday following the game. How many times have you been around a football facility for the Monday following the final game of the season?
Yeah, enough.
You see how banged up those do. Everybody comes in either a cast, a wheelchair, crutches, a walker, a scooter, and it's always the entire offensive line.
I get what you're saying now. Yeah,
you can just go ask what's everyone on the offensive line's affliction. There's going to be something for all of them. So no, you're right. Offensive line is always the most beat up.
Let's switch to the defense, Javon. I'll toss the defensive line to you. What's the word association that comes to mind there?
I thought I was a fan of the defensive tackles until Saturday happened, and I was like, "Oh, okay. I may have put too much stock into this group. Don't know what to think about the edge rushers because Reese isn't on campus yet.
Yeah,
and
he comes in the fall. Yep.
It seems like David O is going to spend most of his time on the edge than that linebacker. But, I mean, someone should talk to the SIDs at SU because he's still listed as linebacker. So maybe they know something we don't. They normally do.
He feels like the new Fidel. He feels like they want him to be the Fidel Diggs.
Yeah. So
type player. Yeah.
I don't know who's the guy on the guys on the edge. It looks like I may have been a little too excited about the interior guys. We already mentioned I'm just not big on the linebackers.
Yeah.
Mentioned on the pod that the secondary can be had, which we saw Saturday. Well, the corners can be had. A lot of responsibility on the safeties this year. I think that is my takeaway from the entire defense. There is a lot of responsibility on the safeties this season.
One guy I think will have a better idea to improve this position will come in the fall because Kevin Jobity spent a lot of time in a green jersey, non-contact in the spring. I think he's somebody that will certainly up the value and the depth of the defensive line when he's a full go. Now, he's not a pass rusher. They still have to find impact there. Every time I watch King Joseph Edwards, he's a guy we get asked about a lot. I just keep coming back to how many times Fran has mentioned, and even some of the position coaches, and Elijah, and some of the position coaches, right? That King, they have to get on him, right? They have to motivate him, right? Fran flat out said he was in my doghouse and I had to get him out of it, right? Like This is year 2 now. It's one thing when you're a freshman and you're going through that. Now it's year 2. There's that standpoint, Javon. The other thing is I look at him like this guy has to get bigger. Now, I know speed is part of the game. Technique's part of the game. But I'm looking at him, and he's listed at 225, and I'm like, this guy's just got to get bigger. I was talking to him. He's a sophomore, so you got to give him time, but that's it. On the edge, you can't be 225, have the build that he has, and knock around some 320-pound offensive tackles, get around them, and make an impact. So people ask me a lot about King, and I think he's on his way, and I think he's a lot of talent, and certainly somebody who's out in the community a lot and has connected with the Syracuse fans in that way, and that's fantastic. But if you're just asking me as a player, he's got to get bigger, and he needs work. And we can't hear more about these situations like, oh, he was in my doghouse and I had to get him out. Like he's got to grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
Secondary we talked about a little bit, but let's just kind of put a bow on that. The word that comes to mind for me is young. They're just young. You got Deuce, of course, is an experienced guy, was in that leadership council that we mentioned a couple times the past couple of days. And it's good that they have that experience there. You mentioned a moment ago how much they're going to have to rely on maybe on the safeties to step in. Replacing a guy like Elijah Clark is going to be tough in that position, but you look around and they're relying on a lot of young talent, notably, of course, Demetrius Samuel Jr., to step in and have big roles for this team.
Safeties, and more safeties. That's the thing. Need Devin Grant to stay healthy. Need Deuce Chestnut to perform. I think Demetrius Samuel is going to be fine on his side of the field at corner, but inside at the nickel and on that other side, pray for some offseason improvement.
And last but certainly not least, Javon, special teams. I have many worries. I don't know.
Now, with Pena gone, you just lost your best punt returner. That is something we forgot to mention.
Yes, it is.
You have lost your best punt returner. So I've seen Nick Armentinto and Booby Johnson also back there taking punts this spring. It was those three. So we'll see. But that's
Omari Hatcher has experience there. We didn't see him in the spring. And Malachi James certainly has a lot of speed, and he's been in and out of practice because he's been running with the track team. But there was one point in practice, Chris mentioned it in a story he wrote today, and I mentioned it on the pod yesterday, that they yelled at Trebor Pena during practice. Fran did. I want 5 punt return touchdowns from you.
Yeah.
Which the guy that led the country last year had 2. So that's kind of a lofty goal. And we asked Ricky Brumfeld about this the other day as well. But that's what Trevor's capable of. He is their top guy in punt returns. You have to replace that now. We don't know who the kicker is. If they can get Jackson Kennedy back, great. But Kennedy stabilized that room last year. But is Jackson Kennedy somebody that excites me as a kicker? No. Special teams overall, the penalties, the issues, how it held Syracuse back. It was the trouble spot on the field last year, Javon. And you don't see a lot of live action special teams in the spring game. We don't see a lot of live action special teams in practice. We saw some during camp. I have concerns there. Ricky Brumfeld's got a big job to straighten that out. So at the very least, it's not an issue on the field next year, which with a younger team, think about the issues they had in special teams with a lot of veterans out there last year. Now you got a younger team trying to find their way on special teams, and I don't think we know who the kicker is. That is going to be something to watch closely in once fall ball comes.
Yeah. You can't survive a full season with a kicker battle going on the whole year and a return man battle going on. So, like, perfect world, you want to figure out both. You've got to figure one out before fall camp. You just have to.
Javon, we have come to the end of spring practice. Well, technically, after they practice in Rochester today, we've come to the end of spring practice. We've got a lot to cover over the next couple of weeks. As you mentioned, the NFL draft all the Syracuse guys. So we'll be tracking that. The portal is open to the 25th. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that. Before you know it, we'll be back at it here, getting into the regular flow of practices here. But it feels like there's never an off season in college football. So while we're at the end of spring practice, there will be plenty for us to keep an eye on for you on the Syracuse football front. But how about that? Your first spring practice as beat reporter already in the books. Time flies when you're having fun.
Doesn't it? Janet Jackson song. Matt Rogers says, got to get Javon a Syracuse hat. No, you don't. I do not root for the teams I cover. And I will tell you, like I tell everyone else, my bachelor's degree comes from Temple University in North Philly. So if I wear any gear, it will be that.
There you go.
Fran, Elijah, Jeff, Aaron Benici, they are all part of the Temple family. So I will be, I will never be rooting against them, but I do not root for the programs that I cover.
I got to give Javon credit. He always finds a way to get a Temple reference in here.
I don't. Well, I do, but I don't. Like this one.
It just comes up naturally.
I almost made it through the whole pod until Matt brought it up. So I can't be faulted for.
See, I've been very disciplined in my Star Wars references. Okay. A lot more of them used to slip through, but I've been trying not to do it as much, but Star Wars Temple, we'll see how that goes. But Javon, thank you for all your insight and great work throughout spring ball. But as noted, we've still got a lot to cover for you guys. So we'll be all over that here on the pod. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Oh, you know what? Before we go, here I am wrapping up the show, and I wanted to give some voice to our Syracuse Sports Insiders. I know we've been going for almost an hour here, but I want to make sure to get their voice in here. That's my fault. I meant to do this earlier.
We got time. Come on.
We got all the time in the world. So my fault, guys. I wanted to get you early here, but here's a little bit of what our Syracuse Sports Insiders had to say about everything that's been going on the past day or so. Bill says, unfortunately, the situation with Pena is caused by the NCAA, and it's an action to make corrections to NIL. The NCAA is waiting for Congress and the courts to implement a course correction. Bill, you're not wrong, but I want to emphasize something here. The NCAA is a convenient villain in this, okay? Remember, the NCAA is the schools themselves. You can't have the schools pointing at this mysterious villain in the shadows, the NCAA, to fix things. They're looking in the mirror when they do that, okay? It is the schools themselves. It is the conferences. It is the power players, conference commissioners that have to fix this. To point at this NCAA, yes, the NCAA is a brick and mortar building in Indianapolis, and it is an organization, but it is the schools themselves. It's not the NCAA's fault what's going on here on its own. The schools themselves have to fix the problem with cooperation with this NCAA organization that is out there. So I don't disagree with you. There's certainly some standards that they should have set here, but it's not all on them. The schools themselves have to be more involved in the process to fix the problems that they created themselves, by the way. That's all.
And not only that, can we stop asking Congress to get so involved with sports? Lord. There are bigger things that I want Congress addressing. Okay? Like my taxes. Lord have mercy. Let's figure out my taxes and my student loan pay. I promise. I care more about Congress figuring out my taxes and my student loans than I care about them addressing the minor issues of college sports compared to everything else that's going on in the world.
We could do a whole pod on that. They go running to Congress saying, fix this for us. No, you broke it. You fix it.
Good.
Anyway, Matt did not like something Chris said yesterday on the pod, saying that the statement, quote, don't break the bank for this guy for 1 year because of the schedule is such a loser mentality. I'm sorry, but if Fran and the university look at it that way, we'll never go where they want to take us. And I texted Matt back about this, but I'll just say this. Look, you got to be realistic about these things, okay? The wrestling fans will get on me if I'm wrong about this, Javon, but I believe it was the great Ted DiBiase that once said everybody has a price, but maybe you don't agree with that price. Trevor Pena, to me, is not worth $1 million. He's not. If that's the number, right? If we're starting the conversation, whatever that number was, he's not that critical that, boy, we have to give him that money here. it's realistic. It's realistic what you're paying him, what his role is. That schedule does matter. You're going to pay a guy, let's just say it's $1.5 million. I'm just throwing a number out there, to come to a team that in all likelihood is going to struggle to get to 6-6 or 7-5 with that schedule. You can say it's a loser mentality all you want. It's also realistic, right? So I don't agree with that. I agree with Fran's assessment of what he should pay people and why in that case.
I blame Ted DiBiase for a lot of the financial illiteracy in this country. Because when you're growing up, you know, Ted made you think $1 million was just
right,
a lot of money. You know, like get to 10 and then we can talk. But Ted, you know, he wasn't even the highest paid, nowhere near the highest paid dude in the industry at that point.
Ted DiBiase and Dr. Evil, right? $1 million. Bill M says a day later after the shock is wearing off, I get his reasoning, meaning Trebor Pena. We're a free enterprise system. It will be hard to hear in the draft next year that Trebor Pena from fill in the blank school got drafted and not Syracuse, right?
Can I take the last sentence of that first?
Yes, you can.
We do need to start addressing guys by what school did they spend most of their time at? You know, like Quincy Roche. That you can't call him Miami. You call that Temple. You can't call.
So Kyle McCord gets drafted. They should say Ohio State, not Syracuse.
You know what? By my logic, I can't bend my own rules. Kyle McCord needs to be Ohio State. Trebor Pena. No. Kyle McCord's an exception. I'm wrong. Now, if you broke a record at one school, then you can
Okay.
So he led the country in passing yards and broke almost every Syracuse record there is.
He could say
Kyle McCord can get Syracuse. But Trebor Pena, unless he has that type of year wherever he transfers, needs to be announced as Syracuse. I hate when we do that in high school basketball because, you know, the big thing is you start off 2-3 years at your local school, then you spend your last year at Montverde or IMG, and everyone says you're a Montverde or IMG product. No, Jalen Duren is a product of Roman Catholic, not Montverde. Robert Wright's a product of Newman Goretti, not Montverde. I can't stand it.
It's also like the Baseball Hall of Fame. They can only put one logo on the hat, and there's so many Hall of Famers that played on 4 or 5 different teams that sometimes it's actually a debate, right? But I remember when Wade Boggs was up for the Hall of Fame, and they were saying, put his Tampa Bay Rays hat. I'm like, stop it.
No.
Come on. Red Sox. Gary O says, can't blame him for leaving with that NIL. Could be concerning with what he said about Collins, but may have said it for an excuse to leave rather than the bag of cash. And RJ says, I wish the kid luck, but damn, he's out over his skis in this case. He doesn't understand what a lucky star he played under last year. Again, I don't agree with that. I think he's being as reasonable as he can about what role he plays here. He's on a path, at least we think, potentially to the National Football League. He's doing what's best for him statistically and financially. I'm not saying Carson Beck is going to be a better quarterback if he ends up at a Miami, for example, than say Rickie Collins, but
that's not a bad quarterback to play for.
And it's not, but let's remember, look, Trevor worked with Rickie every day, not only in practice, but after practice, right? And I think ultimately Rickie's going to be a good quarterback here, but if Trevor sees some concerns in his game that will affect his numbers and his status, everybody's like, oh, he's being a me guy. Yeah, welcome to the real world. Right? Everybody at the end of the day is a me guy and has to worry about their career, right? And I don't blame Trevor for that in that sense. I know it's tough to take because he was going to be a captain and didn't feel like he was the Ted DiBiase, everybody's got a price kind of thing. But ultimately, we're all put in that position in life and have to make decisions based on that. So I don't blame him for that. I don't.
Look, Carson Beck, we saw what he did with Ladd McConkey. If you're a slot receiver, a route runner like Trebor Pena, that entices you, okay? So I'm not mad at it.
All right. We got our insiders in there. I'm glad we did that. Javon, thank you for your great insight throughout spring. But as we mentioned, so much more to cover going forward here with the draft and the portal open. Thanks to our Syracuse Sports Insiders for their great comments and questions throughout spring practice. You guys have been amazing. And we would love for you to join our Syracuse Sports Insider community, giving you direct text message access to me anytime. Your questions, comments, analysis, things you want us to ask players and coaches, in the whole realm of Syracuse sports. We're happy to do it for you. We love the free-flowing conversation with our Syracuse Sports Insiders. You just want to shoot the bull, talk SU sports. That's what we're there for. It's right there on your screen. How to sign up. It's in the show notes as well. It's just $3.99 a month, but you can try it free for 2 weeks, and we would love for you to join our growing community of Syracuse sports fans that are Syracuse Sports Insiders. For now, for Javon Edmonds, I'm Brent Axe. This has been another live edition of Syracuse Sports. We'll be back at you next time, guys. Thanks for hanging with us today.